Tanks, in my opinion, are some of the most fun units in the entire game to play. There's just something about the enemy taking multiple turns and you just countering damage. Here are, in my opinion, the top 5 tanks in the City Opera Omnia Global as of 2022. Number 5 is Layla. A lot of you guys might have forgotten about Layla. Layla is a very peculiar tank. One huge part of her kit is that she evades enemy attacks. Every single time she evades, the entire party has a free turn. This was extremely useful in Lufenia Plus era. And it's still very useful in Shinryu too. It's also great for damage units because they get more turns because of Layla. And as the cherry on top, Layla both batteries and heals the party every single time she evades an attack. Even though she's not in her prime as she once was in the Lufenia Plus era, I do still think that Layla has her uses. A problem that I find with her that keeps her at the number 5 spot and not higher, she does absolutely no damage by herself. You're gonna have to rely on your other 2 units to do that. Number 2, whenever she does warp the party forward, she always puts herself first. So if you're in a force time that's a bit more specific to a certain character, such as Vaughn or Rinoa, Layla warping herself forward in front of everyone else, she's going to end up taking a turn out of force time every single time she does it. So while yes, you'll be able to avoid and heal from enemy attacks, if you're using a more specific FR DPS unit, Layla might hurt you there by taking up extra turns. So unlike before where you can pretty much place her anywhere on any team, in the Shinryu era with Layla, you're going to have to compromise a little bit, you're going to have to work around her, but I still think she's fantastic. Number 4, we have Gladiolus. I still think he's a fantastic tank for people who don't have every single tank in the game. I do think Gladiolus, especially for newer players, is great. He works very similarly to another tank I'm going to reference in this video, and his counterattack damage is mainly AoE. He has a little bit of everything. Also, as being a tank, Gladiolus has very good defense. He also isn't locked to any particular elemental damage, so he can actually make good use of some FRs with his counterattacking. The main reasons why Gladiolus isn't higher in this list, in my opinion, Gladiolus does a lot of things very well. However, there are multiple other tanks that do certain things that he does better. He's a jack of all trades kind of tank. There are units with better defense auras than Gladiolus. He doesn't heal, really. He does battery the party after every counterattack. However, one problem with him that you might find is that if brave damage or brave gains are especially reduced in certain Shinryu fights, he's going to be doing less damage than you would like him to. He's a bit reliant on support in that regard. Again, if you like him and he's a favorite, you can use him definitely. However, despite the fact how husbando he is, would I say he's the best tank in the game? No. Number 3 is Celeste, the one and only tank that has a BT. Celeste is a great starter unit for a lot of new players who are just joining Opera Omnia now. Her damage due to her traps are pretty good. She has great consistent healing. She's a fairly solid enchant and imperil unit, and you can just pop her in, and along with her buffs and her debuffs, all of the party's going to be hitting weak ice damage. Her traps as a tank does some of the biggest damage you're going to see out of most traps. Great thing about those traps is they both battery and heal the party. So add that along with defensive buffs that Celeste herself brings, your party is going to be a lot harder to kill. On top of that, due to her BT effect, she herself can absorb brave damage, meaning if the enemy does any sort of brave damage, it's not going to do anything. It's just going to heal. I think she's fantastic. And again, for new players who do need a little bit more defense in their roster, who can also provide good avenues for damage, Celeste is single-handedly one of the best BTFR units in the game in that regard. She's a fantastic tank by far. However, there are multiple situations in which Celeste might not be the best. Keep in mind, she doesn't evade anything, nor does she make anyone else in the party evade. So if the enemy ends up inflicting a lot of debuffs due to their attacks, if you don't have anything to specifically counteract that, you're kind of just going to be debuffed a lot. I still think she's a fantastic tank who does great damage. However, it's not just a plug and play. You do have to research a bit into what she does in order to optimize her fully. Number 2, we have Oren, the single-handedly best AoE tank in the game. His counterattack actually does 3 AoE HP dumps, whereas Gladiolus only does 2. So if you're looking for a tank with more damage, Oren is the way to go. On top of that, his debuffing is actually quite solid. The best debuff that he inflicts on the enemy is melee brave damage down, to where the enemy now becomes weak to melee brave damage. So in some cases, if you're running all melee teams, you don't even need elemental imperil enchant in order to do weak damage. Oren's debuff can work just fine. In terms of the easiest unit to play out of all 5 in this video, I would say Oren's the easiest to play. He is the best unit in this list for a plug and play type of style. Just pop him in, pop his LD so he can do his counterattacks, and that's it. That's pretty much all you need to do with Oren. He's very accessible and easy to use, and to me, that's always a major plus to have. He works in so many different scenarios, to the point where if any fight has more than one unit, Oren's a top-tier tank to bring, by default. The one and only problem I would say Oren has is the fact that he doesn't evade. So debuffs could be an issue if they're especially heavy in a fight. You're gonna have to find a way around that when the time comes, but it's really not that hard to do. The number one tank in this game, in my opinion, that is pretty much the go-to tank that I use for enemy fights that take a lot of turns, is Gloof. Gloof, in my opinion, is the best tank in the game because he both evades. It's also nigh impossible for him to be killed. He does some of the hardest and most consistent damage out of any tank in the game, and he's very not reliant on Brave gains. He's able to do max damage even in lockout fights. That alone, to me, boosts my opinion of him to be top 3 in the game when it comes to tanks. I gotta talk about the fact that he barely dies. So unless the enemy has some sort of guaranteed hit, Omega instant kill, any other attack, Gloof is going to survive. Even if most of his damage is single target. Unless the fight has 3 enemies on the board, Gloof will work in pretty much every other fight. Even if it's magic-based enemies and Gloof doesn't end up doing his melee counterattack, he still does Final Strike, which is 4 max HP dumps. That's on par with Celeste, and he doesn't even need that much setup for it. So when people mention that, oh, he's not good against magic brave attackers, he's still one of the best in the game. He just evades so much, it's so hard to kill him, and being on par with Celeste, he's one of the most self-sufficient tanks in the game. He does so much for the party, and there's too many upsides to him to not overlook his small, minute flaws. That's it for the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!